Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaq, Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Russell. These are the guys people bring up when they're talking about the best centers of all time. But there's one guy who a lot of people don't have in their top 5, and most people don't even have in their top 10, even 20. A lot of people haven't even heard of this guy. And I do believe that an argument could be made for this guy to be a top 5 center of all time, and that's Arvydas Sabonis. So before we get into the main part of this video, we are trying to do a daily December. I'm trying to upload every single day in December. So if you guys like this content and you guys could subscribe, that would mean a lot. We are also trying to hit 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And currently we are on track. It's looking like we're going to do it. So hopefully we can do that by the end of the year. If you guys enjoy the content, subscribe. Anyway, now let's get on to the video. A lot of people either don't know who Arvydas Sabonis is or only really know of him from his short stint in the NBA with the Portland Trailblazers, long after his physical prime. But in his prime, Arvydas Sabonis was arguably a top 5 player in the world. I know you guys say I like to overhype European players, but it's not just me. 3-time All-Star Detlef Schrempf was actually quoted as saying that if Arvydas Sabonis had played in his prime in the NBA, that he would have been the best player in the league, and arguably the greatest player of all time. While I wouldn't go that far, I do think that Arvydas Sabonis could have been a great NBA player, and who knows, maybe even a top 20 player of all time. So Arvydas Sabonis was a 7'3" center who had extremely good athleticism and mobility for his height. He could shoot threes, he could play in the post, he could defend, and he's also arguably the greatest passing big man of all time. A lot of people argue that it's between him and Bill Walton for the best passing big man ever. Sabonis played behind the Iron Curtain, so very few of his highlights can be seen. And it's believed that the 1985 to 1988 stretch of playing heavily in the Soviet Union is what really caused his prime to be short. He had an extreme lack of rest, and also his various leg injuries weren't given much time to heal. In 2011, Sabonis said that overuse by the coach of the Soviet national program was a major contributing factor to his first Achilles tendon injury back in 1986. And even after that injury, he was selected in the first round of the NBA draft by the Portland Trailblazers. He was Lithuanian, which at the time was part of the Soviet Union, and that meant that the Soviet Union had to grant him the ability to play professional basketball before he could go to the NBA. So obviously he wasn't allowed to play in the NBA because of that. In the 1986 FIBA World Cup, he led the USSR team to the championship, beating a David Robinson-led Team USA in the final, with Sabonis arguably outplaying one of the greatest centers of all time. And that was after the first Achilles injury. Imagine what he was like before that. And in 1988, he suffered another devastating Achilles injury, and actually went to Portland to rehab the injury with the Blazers medical staff. The thing was that the USSR national team rushed him back in time for the Olympics when he clearly wasn't fit to play. He'd hardly played basketball for the previous year and only trained a week before the Olympics, but still led the USSR team to a semi-final win over the USA team, which featured NBA All-Stars David Robinson, Mitch Richmond, and Danny Manning. While you could argue that Sabonis was outplayed this time by David Robinson, which if you look at the box score he clearly was, he was still the leader of that Soviet team who did beat a strong American team. The next year the Soviets cleared him to play professionally, but Sabonis postponed his travel because he didn't feel he was physically ready for the NBA. 2 bad Achilles injuries in 2 years were definitely a reason for that. Eventually, Sabonis would develop chronic knee, ankle, and groin issues that limited his mobility and explosiveness by the mid-90s. In 1995, Sabonis decided to go to the NBA to play with the Trailblazers. He was x-rayed by the Blazers medical staff, and they found that his injuries were so bad that he could qualify for a handicap parking spot based on his x-ray alone. Even still, the Blazers signed him. In his rookie season, he averaged 14.5 points per game. He averaged 8.1 rebounds per game, shooting nearly 40% from 3 in less than 24 minutes per game, which is extremely good. In his 3rd season in the NBA, at 34 years old, he averaged 16 points, 10 rebounds per game, and 3 assists per game, which is extremely good. And even while pushing 40 years old and having some of the worst injuries that have ever been seen for an NBA player, he still played in 78 games and averaged 6.1 points and 4.3 rebounds per game in 2003. So was Arvydas Sabonis a top 15-20 player of all time? That's an extremely difficult one to say, obviously, because a lot of his highlight footage can't be seen because obviously he was behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I'm not going to explain in this video. But years out of his prime, Sabonis, whose injuries were so bad that a lot of people were shocked he was even able to play, was still a solid NBA player and was a leader of a Portland Trailblazers team that made a couple of Western Conference Finals. In Clyde Drexler's opinion, if Sabonis had been able to spend his prime in Portland next to players like him, Terry Porter, Buck Williams and Cliff Robinson, he believes the Blazers would have had 4, 5 or 6 titles. And while I do think that's a little bit exaggerated, I'd be very, very confident that if he had played in his prime in Portland, they'd have at least one NBA championship, and that definitely Michael Jordan would not have a 6-0 finals record. The problem was that the Bulls team, especially in the first three-peat, couldn't deal with post players. They got destroyed by the Rockets in the regular season, and while I don't believe that Sabonis was as good as Hakeem Olajuwon, I think that he could have been the second best center in the NBA at that time. He could pass, he could shoot threes, he had an unbelievable post game, and he was a great defender with extremely high basketball IQ. So while I don't believe that he's as good as Hakeem Olajuwon, I don't believe he's a top 5 center of all time. A lot of people do think he's a top 5 center of all time. He's without doubt top 15, top 20 center of all time. A legit argument could be made that he's top 5, and in my opinion, he's probably top 10. Most people that saw Sabonis in his prime argue that he's a top 10 basketball player of all time. But again, it's hard to make that argument as a person that hasn't seen too much footage of him in his prime. But from what we've seen of Sabonis' past prime and the small clips that we've seen of him in his prime and knowing what he did, Sabonis was 7'3", athletic, was a shooting big man before shooting big men became popular, could block shots. He could pass the ball as well as any center, probably ever. He passed the ball better than the Gasol brothers. Arguably, him or Bill Walton is the greatest passing big man of all time. So Sabonis is definitely up there in the top tier of centers. And who knows, there's a good shot that if he had played in the NBA in his prime, Michael Jordan wouldn't have a perfect NBA Finals record. So anyway, that's the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.